This meeting is being recorded.
All right, hello and welcome back to Principles of Macroeconomics. Happy to have all of you with us as we have just entered week 10 of our 16-week course together. So we're more than halfway done. We're moving along, moving right along, aren't we? We're making some progress. It's Alicia and I were just talking. It seems like time is flying by, and Allison said it feels like we're almost at Thanksgiving already, and we're like a month out. It's amazing. It's amazing how quick time goes by, isn't it? And I just want to say thank you to all of you for sticking through this. And I know that this has not been an easy ride. There is a lot of work in this course. There is a lot going on in your lives and in your other courses and all that. I just want to say thank you for your hard work. It means a lot to me, and hopefully it means a lot to you. Remember that the name of the game to pass this course is to do all the work. So the only way you can pass is if you do all the work, right? And you're seeing that. You're seeing that in your grades. So, if you're not happy with your grade, that means you didn't do something. So, it could be a discussion board. It could be a hypothesis. I tell you, it all adds up. So, if you're not happy with your grade, it's because you didn't do some of the work. So it's really important that you look at your grade book and you look at your performance. And if you're not happy, it's probably because you're missing a couple of things. If you add up all them discussions, because I know what it's like. Those discussions aren't that fun, right? They ain't that entertaining. They're not as cool as they could be. And so if you don't do the discussion boards, I'm telling you, it's going to be real hard to pass the course. If you don't do the discussion boards, you don't do the hypothesis assignments, it'll be real difficult for you to pass. So remember, if you're not happy with your grade right now, it's a good chance it's because you didn't do a discussion board, you didn't do a hypothesis, or you missed some other type of assignment. So to be very clear, you must do all the work in this course to try to earn a passing grade. I'll say that just one more time because, we've been at this for 10 weeks now. If you're not happy with your grade, it's probably because you're missing something. You didn't complete a discussion board, you didn't complete a hypothesis, or something else. So, once again, it is critical that you complete all the work in this course, including the discussion boards and hypothesis assignments, in order to attempt to pass this course. So that's my word of advice, is if you want to try to pass, you got to do all the stuff. It's really that simplicity, okay? So please, if you want to pass, you need to do the work. And I'll get off my soapbox and we'll jump into week 10. So here we are in the classroom, week 10. Today we're going to talk about tools of finance, and we'll also talk about unemployment rates. So before we jump into those conversations, just to show you what's going on in the classroom, where we are, what we're looking at. So under your instruction materials is where you find your PowerPoint presentations, etc. And within the Engage and Explore for this week, we have a hypothesis assignment, which is an unemployment video hypothesis. We'll open up like this, and just as you've done before, and as you can see what your colleagues have already done, making sure you post, one original, one response to your classmates. This is what is required, okay? So it's as simple as highlighting the area in where you want to make the post, and you click annotate, and then you make the annotation. So I select this, I select annotate, and I make the annotation. Simple. So please, let's make sure we're getting those hypothesis assignments completed. So we have one for this week. And then related to today's discussion on finance tools and unemployment, we have a chapter 14 and 15 quiz. So those are your 2 action items for this week. Some of you have already done it. Thank you so much. And some of you are still working on it, and that's okay. So, but if you want to work ahead in this course, you're also more than welcome to do that. I have no problem with that. So everything on the course is open, just so you know. So let's go ahead and jump in on our discussion of finance tools, and then we'll jump in on unemployment. So this particular chapter is really important to me because I typically teach accounting courses along with economics courses, and they're both related to finance. Finance is not just this technical way of learning and understanding how money works. It's also a way of running your business. It's a way of understanding how the economy works. It's a way of understanding how life works in a general sense. And so we use basic financial tools in order to run our lives and run the economy and run our businesses. So it's a really important discussion and important concepts for you to understand. When you think about a dollar today and how much it's worth, we think about the future of that dollar. So if you put a dollar in the bank today, do you think it's going to be worth $1 tomorrow or $1 a year from now? What do you think? What happens if you put $1 in the bank account today? What happens to it? Over time, over a year? Is it worth $1 in a year from now? What do you think? Is $1 today worth $1 in a year from now? That's my question to y'all on the call.
Yes.
Would it be less?
Mhm.
Would it be less? I hope not. I really hope not.
Or would it stay the same?
It might be more
It might
because
be
aren't
more.
we
Why is that?
going away from the dollar?
It might be more because why?
Because aren't we trying to get away from the dollar bill now as it is? So wouldn't
No,
it raise value?
no, we're not trying to get away from the dollar. That'll never happen.
No, it will not go anywhere depending on the type of account it is in.
Well, correct. So if I deposit $1 into my savings account, okay, I deposit $1 today into my savings account. And a year from now, how much will that dollar be worth?
$1.
Maybe. Hopefully more. Why would it be worth more than $1 in a year from now? What do you think? What happens when you leave money in a bank over time? What happens to it?
It gains interest?
It gains interest. Thank you. You nailed it, Isis. Thank you. It gains interest. So if I leave my dollar in the bank account today, hopefully it should be worth $1.08 a year from today. The 8 cents is the interest that it gains over time. So $1 today is not worth the same as $1 tomorrow. You see what I'm saying? And the reason for that is because this concept we call the time value of money. Money changes over time. The value of the money changes over time is what I'm trying to say. The reason why this conversation should be important to all of you is because someday, hopefully someday you all will retire from working. Okay? And when you retire, you want to have something there. You got to have money to retire. You know how expensive it is to live in this country. You got to make sure you got some money. How you got some money? You saved it. You saved it while you were young, while you were working. When you get older and you get to retirement age, you want to make sure that that money's still there. You got some money in your retirement age. That's how you're going to survive, right? Social Security It's there, but I tell you what, depending on what our Congress does, it may not look the same in the future. Okay, so you don't want to have to rely on Uncle Sam to survive in the future. You see, you want to rely on yourself. And the way we rely on ourselves to survive in the future is by saving. So if you have a retirement account, maybe it's a 401k or a 403b or a 403c, something like that. And then there's government retirement account, and I'm sure there's a couple of other ones that I'm missing. There's the what do you call the Roth 401k. There's a standard 401k. There's a bunch of other retirement plans depending on the organizations that you work for. If you work for government, it's a different number. If you work for like a school, it's a different number, right? What I'm trying to say is that these retirement accounts, we put money into it as we're working over time. The idea is that it gains value over time. Why? Because it's invested in the stock market, and as the market moves forward, we're gaining interest on our investment. That's the whole idea behind this. So $1 today that we save is not worth $1 tomorrow. It's the dollar plus the interest rate, right? So that's the importance behind today's conversation, is that you're going to use this type of knowledge to help you as you save toward retirement, as you save toward your future, because it is so important that while you're young and working, that you're putting some money aside into retirement. So that way, when it comes time for you to reach that lovely age of 67 and a half or whatever it is these days, that you can retire and have some money in order to survive. Because you don't want to just rely on Social Security. Okay? So that's the whole premise behind today's conversation. That's why it's really important that you understand the time value of money. And especially as we talk about what we call present value. So think about that allocation. We're saving money, so we're allocating money, and we're doing it over time. All right? Why do we save money? We do it to mitigate risk. We do it so we can comfortably retire. Try to figure out the amount of money today that you would need in order to have a certain amount in the future. So just give you an example. They say that for you to comfortably retire, you're going to need, $500,000 or $1 million in your retirement accounts. Okay? It's probably somewhere near there these days. So think about that. It's like, okay, well, I don't have $1 million. I'm not rich. So I got to figure out, what do I need to start doing today in order to get to $1 million in my retirement accounts by the time I'm ready to retire? How much do I got to start putting in today? Okay. We call that the present value. That's the amount that I need to put in today in order to generate a certain amount in the future. If that makes sense. That's the idea behind present value. The future value is the amount that I want to have in the future. It tells me how much I need to start saving today. So present value, it's the amount today. I need to generate a certain amount in the future. Future value is that certain amount that tells me how much I would need today in order to get to that point. So present value and future value, they have an inverse relationship. It's just the opposite. Another part of the time value of money, of course, is the interest. as we said, a dollar today is not the same as a dollar tomorrow or a dollar in a year from now. It should accumulate interest over time. As our savings accumulates interest over time, it's compounded. We call it a compounding rate of interest. Let me help this make sense to you. So if I deposit a dollar today into the savings account, in a year from now, that should be worth $1.08. Okay, at the current interest rate. Now, if I leave the $1.08 in that bank account, after the second year goes by, it should be worth $1.24. Okay, why? Because the interest also earns interest. If you leave the principal amount, the dollar, plus the interest in that savings account, what happens is in the following year, you earn additional interest on top of the existing interest in the account. We call that compounding. The interest compounds on top of the interest already in the account or already earned. Does that make sense? Kind of get that concept, right? Super important that we understand this because we're talking about your financial future. Yeah. So if you start saving today, track what happens to that savings, okay? Put a dollar into a 401k and see what happens. Right? That dollar is going to be worth at least $1.08 by the end of the year. $0.08. The following year is going to be worth $1.24. The following year it's going to be worth $2.13. The following year it's going to be worth $3. You see what happens, right? And all that's stemmed from $1. Imagine what it looks like when you put thousands of dollars in. You see how exponentially forward it moves. You gain interest on top of the interest. That's what compounding is. So here's that same example. Just $100 instead of $1, right? So you're trying to figure out, well, if I put $100 in the bank account today, how much will it be worth in future years? Okay, number of years. I don't know. So it depends on what the interest rate is, of course. So I use a financial calculator and I plug in my values. Present value is how much I put in today, $100. R is the interest rate. So you plug in the value for R. And that will tell me, based off the number of years, you've got to figure out how many years, the future value will be. And that's what this crazy looking calculation shows us. Okay, don't go hand jamming this one yourself. Use a financial calculator. There's plenty of them online, or you can use one on your phone. I'm sure there's one on your phone, or even an actual financial calculator, which I happen to have. But you just plug in the values. Okay, plug in present value. How much is that? Interest rate, number of years, and that'll help you to find the future value. You can also use that financial calculator and work the other way to find present value. As long as you have the other data, you can find the missing variable. So so that brings us to our next question, which is, how much would you have to deposit in the bank right now to yield $200 in a future year, right? We don't know. So how do we figure that out? We take the future value, in this case, 200, divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the power of the number of years. Okay, so again, financial calculator. Don't try to do this one you know, writing it out because it's going to take a long time. But if you use your financial calculator, you'll be able to find either present value or future value, right? It's just a matter of plugging in the values that you have to find the missing value. To find the present value of a future sum of money, we use what's called a discounting process. So basically what that means is that I know how much money I want to have in the future. I got to figure out how much money I need today in order to get to that point. We call that process working backward. We call that discounting, just a technical name. And the way that we do that, the way that we work backward, is we take the future amount, the future amount that we're looking for, which is X, divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the power of N, which is the number of years. Right? That's the present value equation. So that's time value of money. It's, again, very important concept to understand. You don't need to memorize that equation. But what I want you to do is think about your future and your future retirement plans, because your entire financial future is going to revolve around that present value equation. It really does. I promise you it does. It's just you got to think about like how much money you're going to need to retire, because that future value equation is going to help to dictate how much you'll actually receive in retirement. Yeah. So just think about that. And, if you ever want to have conversations on time value of money, feel free to reach out to me. So one thing we do really well when it comes to financial tools is we try to manage our risk. Risk is something that we need to take into consideration when we make a decision, right? I think about risk around everything I do. It's like you get into your car, okay, you're going to start driving. What are the risks involved with driving? Well, there's quite a few of them, actually. We just don't think about them all the time. There's a risk I might get into an accident. There's a risk my car won't start. There's a risk my car will start. There's a risk that I might have to stop and get gas. There's a risk that my insurance might go up. There's a risk that my tire might blow out. There's a risk that, I'm going to see someone I don't like. Right? There's risks involved with driving. The risk is usually the other driver, right? But we always take risk into consideration when we do something, at least we should. And there's no way to avoid risk entirely. We just have to manage risk based off of our expectations and our ability to be comfortable with that risk, right? So, especially when it comes to money, there's risk involved in our decision making. So if you think about this, let's say I want to invest in a certain company. What's the risk associated with that? Company might go out of business. That's a huge risk. The company might be faced with some external factor, like, I don't know, some type of scandal or robbery or natural disaster or something, right? That's a risk. That's a risk we take when we invest. The ultimate risk of investment is we might lose our investment. Yeah, that's a risk. Absolutely is. So you got to think about your risk and your risk tolerance when it comes to investing or when it comes to doing something with your money. Your risk tolerance is your ability to tolerate certain levels of risk. If it's a low risk thing, I'm usually pretty comfortable with that. If it's a high risk kind of investment, I am very skeptical. right? I'm a very risk adverse kind of person. I typically avoid situations with high risk, right? I dislike risk. I don't like the uncertainty. So you got to think about your risk tolerance when you look at your utility, which is your level of satisfaction when it comes to, in making investing decisions. Utility is a really important concept to understand because we're looking at your ability to attain certain levels of wealth. And what's interesting is that the more wealth a person has, we see diminishing marginal utility. What we mean by that is that the more wealthy people tend to get, the less satisfied they become, right? There's less utility from that additional dollar. Or if you're someone like me who's just comfortable with life, it's like, oh, I don't need fancy things, I'm a very comfortable person. I'm a simple kind of guy. Real simple. I don't need new things. I don't care. I don't care about new things. I just, if my phone's 10 years old, so be it. I don't care. It still works. That's just me. I'm comfortable with that I'm satisfied with that. So if I make more, great. It's going to change my level of happiness? Probably not. So you got to think about your individual utility, which is determined by your level of happiness. If you're satisfied, right? If you're satisfied with how much you're making today, great. Then you are experiencing marginal utility. It might even be diminishing. It's like, so that extra dollar, it's like, right? So that's what my utility function is. And this is that utility function graphically, right? The more satisfied or wealthy you are, the less utility there is, right? We're talking about that top part of the graph. So a lot of us are right there in the middle. It's like, if I get an extra $1,000, yeah, I'm going to be super happy. I mean, that's going to make me better off, maybe. If I lose $1,000, that's going to make me worse off, right? So I'm usually somewhere in the middle. The more I gain, the more utility I have, but as I get closer to that top, it starts to diminish. And that's what this is showing us. So all of that to say, think about where you are today. Think about where you want to be in the future, especially as you make your way toward retirement. Think about the risks you're willing to take. Right? Younger people tend to make very risky investment decisions in their portfolio. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can make your retirement portfolio very risky when you're young. That's not a problem. When you're older, it becomes a concern, right? Because when we get older, we don't want a whole lot of risk, okay? We just want things to be nice and smooth, yeah? So usually with higher risk, there's higher returns, right? So like if it's a high risk investment, it'll probably yield a higher return. Like my return might be 12 or 14% instead of the standard 7. Lower risk, it might be a 7% return. Higher risk, it might be a 14% return. The return is, the additional, it's like the interest you're getting back, right? So I want you to think about that. Younger people tend to make higher risk investing decisions. Higher risk, higher returns. They're not terribly worried about losing that principal. When you get older, you're worried about losing that principal, so you'll take on less risk. This is really important. Insurance. There is insurance for pretty much everything, isn't there? There's pet insurance. There's insurance for your house, insurance for your car, insurance for your life, insurance for your kids' lives, insurance for your spouse's life, all kinds of insurance, medical insurance, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on and on and on. There's many different markets for insurance. Especially here in the United States, we have a lot of insurance companies that are very wealthy, and they tend to insure a lot of different things. There's a very obvious correlation between the amount of risk that someone has and the amount of insurance that they pay. For very bad drivers, especially around the DC Beltway, their insurance is probably high. Why? Because they're bad drivers. Right? But younger people, we'll say between the ages of 16 and 28-ish, 25. Between the ages of 16 and 25, your car insurance rates are going to be high. Why? Because you're a risky driver. You're young. You're inexperienced. Once you've reached beyond the age of 25, your insurance rate should go down. Why? Because you got more experience. Hopefully a lot less accidents. Right? Higher risk, higher premium. That's what we're trying to say here. It's kind of like health insurance. If you're a smoker, I'm sure that your health insurance is much higher than everyone else's. Why? Because smoking is a direct correlation with lung cancer. So therefore, your medical insurance is going to be higher because you have a higher chance of developing lung cancer. Simple correlation. Higher risk, higher insurance premium. Of course, the opposite is also true. Oftentimes, we hope that we never need the insurance. The reason why we have insurance is for what we call peace of mind. If something does happen, I'm insured. Okay? Hopefully we'll never have to use it. It's there when we need it, though. That's why we pay the premiums. Insurance is the mitigator. They're the middleman. They're not there to eliminate risk. Okay? The risk is always going to be there. But it helps them to spread the risk. That's what insurance does. Higher risk, higher insurance. Right? Low risk, low insurance rate. Simple. Insurance companies are not perfect, and they do not distinguish between high risk and low risk customers simply. Okay? They factor what we call averages. I'll give you a classic example. I used to live in Baltimore. And when I was living in Baltimore, my insurance rate for my car was so high. And I was like, what the heck? Because when I had moved to Baltimore, I'm like, hey, I won't call the insurance company. I'm like, hey, why are my rates so high? What's going on here? They're like, oh, it's the zip code that you live in. I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what the hell with the zip code? I'm like, I haven't had any accidents. I haven't had any tickets. My insurance went up because the zip code I live in? Ain't that, I was so upset about that. And it's because of this reason. They cannot perfectly distinguish between high and low risk customers because that zip code has a lot of accidents, right? They cannot monitor all the customers' risky behaviors either, meaning there ain't no GPS monitor in my car, at least not that I'm aware of. And then we have the price of insurance. It reflects the risk the company faces when the insurance is bought. Okay? So when your insurance goes up and you're like, hey, I didn't do nothing wrong, why'd it go up? It's not you, it's the company. Because they're insuring all these other people that might make a claim. It is really important that you as an individual or you as a company diversify your risk. There's this old rule, and maybe you've heard older people say this: don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? What that means is don't just invest in one simple thing, right? You want to spread that out. Like when I invest in my retirement account or single stocks or whatever, when I invest, I spread it out. I don't have just energy stocks. I have energy stocks. I have home staple stocks. I got stocks in electronics. I got stock in, some tech. I got stock in healthcare, stock in, you name it, right? Spread it out. Why spread it out? Because if one market goes down in one of those sectors, you'll be okay. It's not going to take your whole portfolio down, just part of it, right? I'm mitigating the risk. I'm diversifying. That's what that means. So again, you want to spread out the risk. How to spread out the risk? Make sure you're invested in a lot of different sectors, not just in one. Okay, I like technology just as much as the rest of y'all do, but my stocks are in all kinds of areas, not just technology. Why? Because of the risk. This graph helps to spell it out for us. You can see, if I have 50 shares of stock, if I have 50 shares of stock and they're spread across all these different markets, my risk is real low. But also, my return might be a little lower too. Right? So if we look at this relationship, if I have, let's say, 5 shares of stock, my risk is really high, but my returns are as well. But because the market goes up and down, we want to make sure we spread it out to mitigate the risk. You heard me say this word already, diversify. I want to diversify my portfolio. I want to spread it out. I want to be invested in all different kinds of areas, diversified. That's what that means. You can eliminate some risk, but not all of it. If you invest in one single company, we call that firm-specific risk. And if that single company is affected in one way or another, your investment is at risk. And in some markets, there might be some type of impact. For example, back in the early 2000s, there was called some of you may remember this, it was called a tech bubble, okay? A bubble is when there's a lot of hype in the marketplace for a specific sector, okay? Back then, technology was like really starting to flourish because the internet was becoming widely available and all these new websites, e-commerce type of stuff was going on in the early 2000s. So the bubble for that sector was getting real big. And eventually it burst because there was a lot of issues going on in that space, too much competition, too much hype, and so the bubble burst. And so all the values of that's technology sector went way down. Okay, that's a market risk. So again, the trade-off here is that with higher risk comes higher returns. However, higher risk is also higher risk, right? So I might receive more when I sell my share of stock because it's a high risk stock. Great, yeah. But that's not always the case because if that stock goes down, it goes down hard, right? So it's good to diversify and spread it across. And this shows you the relationship between that trade-off between risk and return. Higher risk, higher return. Lower risk, lower return. Simple. So, as you look at your retirement portfolio and your individual investing, be really careful. Understand the companies that you're investing in. Understand the value of the stock price. If the price is below its value, we call that undervalued, obviously. If the stock price is above the company's value, we call that overvalued. In most cases, companies are fairly valued. That's where the value of the company equals the share price of stock. So be really careful when you're investing. Read everything, look at everything, look at the company, look at the direction, etc., before making any investment decision. And I would always recommend consulting with a professional. Be smart. Do research. Don't just invest, okay? Don't just throw money into a savings account or into 401k and think it's going to do well. Know what's in there. Understand the risk. Understand the different companies. Do all your own research. Right? See what the analysts are saying about the companies, but don't rely on them entirely. I always recommend what we call mutual funds, which is a spread of a lot of different stocks bundled into one tool called a mutual fund. They're a lot less risk because there's a lot of different companies and a lot of different sectors. Don't rely on somebody to tell you the future. Okay, it just doesn't work that way. There's no magic ball. Be skeptical. Follow the companies that you're investing in. Just be smart about it. I use stock indexes as for informational purposes only. The NASDAQ, the S&P 500, the Russell 2000. These are all stock indexes, okay, or stock markets. The stock market, the index, the S&P 500, is what I follow very closely to understand the health of the economy. Why? Because the S&P 500 represents 500 companies that are publicly traded in the United States. These companies are small, medium, and large, and are in a lot of different sectors of the economy. Bundled together, the S&P 500 value tells you a lot about the health of the economy. More so than the Dow. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is what a lot of people follow, isn't very indicative of the actual health of the economy. The S&P 500 is. Why? Because the Dow Jones Industrial Average only has 30 companies, and they're all large cap companies. The S&P 500 is a much more diversified portfolio that is representative of the overall economy. So that's stock markets. Be very skeptical of what you see. Also validate what you see. Invest rationally. Make rational decisions. Diversification, very important. Make sure you diversify. Everyone agrees on that. How do we know if a market is efficient or is just fluctuating in price? Thinking about the stocks, right? Most people assume that buying and selling stocks are rational, and they are. People buy and sell stocks all the time for various reasons, various assumptions. It's important to understand the direction that the stock value flows in. It goes up and down. That tells you when you should buy or sell. Stock prices fluctuate on a regular basis. Part of the reason is psychological. Now, here's what this means. If you look at a stock price, let's say Starbucks, for example, and it's relatively steady, holding strong. Let's say it's around $100 a share, whatever. That's like its average price. You'll see it go up and down on certain days. And sometimes you're like, well, why did it go down this one day, like really badly? It's a psychological reason. Why? What I mean by that is there was a day when the company had some weird thing happen with I don't know if y'all remember the story about the bathrooms and them not letting people use it in, where the hell was it? Philadelphia, I think. That story, when it came out, was very negative news for the company. And so that's a psychological thing. It caused the value of the company to go down drastically. Weird thing, psychological. But it happens, right? It causes them part of the price to go up and down. Don't freak out when the market goes down. Okay, remain calm. It's not the end of the world because it's going to go back up. It always fluctuates. When the price of the asset is above its fundamental value, we call that experiencing a speculative bubble. That's the tech bubble I was telling you about in the early 2000s. These happen oftentimes because of dividend payments, final sales, mergers, acquisitions, etc. And the last part of this is to understand that sometimes the market behaves irrationally. The movement in the stock price sometimes goes on the news cycle. If there's bad news that comes out about somebody in the company or something with the company's history or something with something somebody said, the market will behave irrationally. It'll go down, go up, whatever. But it's important to understand the trends and make corrections accordingly. So that's our fast conversation on financial tools. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about unemployment. So stand by. Let me just stop this part of the recording and start the next one.